Okay, I'm going to make this video. This is going to be a video just covering the path menu and the tools that I use from the path menu. This will be a follow-up to the one I made, the Absolute Beginner's Guide to Using Inkscape for CNC. I'm going to, as you can see here, I typed out the different commands that I'm going to discuss. This is not an all-inclusive list of the path menu options. Some of the path menu options I never use. These are just the options I use. So if you want to learn the other ones, you can feel free to explore those and try them out and see if they work for you. I've made thousands of files and never used those other options, so not saying they're not useful, but I'm just going to discuss the ones I use. So I'm going to call it the essential path menu functions. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do, just for the purpose of discussing these, is I'm going to draw a few shapes out here. I'm going to grab my square tool and draw a square. Then I'm going to grab my circle tool. I will draw a circle. I'll change the color of that. And I'm going to lay that on top of this square here. I'm not doing anything precise here. I'm just laying out a few shapes here for the purpose of discussing these path menu options. And here I'll put a stroke with my Bezier tool and I'll set that stroke color to black and turn the fill color off. Okay, so I've just drawn some shapes here, nothing precise, just kind of laid 4 circles on top of a square, and I have a single line stroke here drawn with the Bezier tool. Now the first item here is object to path. So what object to path does is exactly what it says it does. This item here, if I click on this with my selection tool, you see down here at your information bar, that's a circle. If I click on this, that's a rectangle. If I click on this, that's a path with 2 nodes, a single line cut. So if I select this circle and I go to path, object to path, as you can see down here, that is now no longer called a circle, that's called a path with 4 nodes. So object to path does exactly what it says. It'll convert the object you've drawn into a path. The next one here is stroke to path, and once again, that's self-explanatory. This is a single line stroke. If I go to my node editor, you'll see here it just has 2 nodes, 1 start and 1 finish. That's just a single line. It looks a little thick. That's because my stroke thickness is turned up to a 1/4 inch, but if I turn that down to the default 10 thousandths, as you can see, that's a very thin line. And if that cut with the plasma cutter, that'll just cut a single path. Now if I set that back to where it was 1/4 inch thickness, and I were to go to my path menu and select stroke to path, that's now going to convert that single line into a closed path. So as you see here now, that has 6 nodes because it has rounded ends on it. So stroke to path converts a single line stroke into a closed path. That can be useful for, like in this situation, I'm going to go back and make it back into a single line. In this instance, maybe I want to cut a single line for a bend relief on a plate, but if I wanted to cut that out thicker, a 1/4 inch thick, I can convert that stroke to path and make that a closed path. Okay, the next one here is trace bitmap, and I forgot to mention the reason I did these in different colors. The ones I put in red are functions that I use every day. The ones I put in blue are functions that I rarely use or sometimes use. The 2 that I put asterisks beside are functions that will require a separate video to go more in depth on them. Okay, but anyway, the next item here is trace bitmap. So with trace bitmap, that would be anytime you're going to turn a raster image like a JPEG or a PNG into a path that you can edit and add into your design. So what I'm going to do is File, Import, and I've got this PNG here that I found on the internet. I'm going to open that and bring that into my window here. Now with that selected, I can go to Path, Trace Bitmap. That'll open up this menu here, and as you see here, they have the live updates is checked automatically when I open this up. This preview window here shows you what you'll end up with when you trace it. As you can see right now, it's showing nothing. That's because this is a yellow JPEG or PNG image, and the contrast between the yellow and white is very low. So in order to get that to pick up, I can adjust my threshold up here, and the more I go up, when I get around 600, now it actually picks that yellow up and will give me a result from my trace bitmap. Then you'll have some more options here like speckles. That would be more for if you have a grainy image and you see that it's got little dots in here. You can adjust this speckles, and that will reduce the smaller spots. The higher you go, the bigger the spots it'll get rid of. Then you have smooth corners. You can adjust that. If you have sharp edges here, it'll smooth out some of those corners. And optimize, that will essentially reduce the amount of nodes that you end up with in your final trace. The higher you go, the less nodes you'll get. So once you have everything set where you want it, you hit apply, and now you see that's changed black over here. If I click on that, I can pull that off. That is the new path that I just created by tracing this bitmap image. Now I can delete. I can select this and hit backspace on my keyboard, delete the image file. I don't need it anymore. I now have a path I can work with. So that's what trace bitmap function does. Union adds two or more paths together into one path. So if I have these circles here and I select two of them or all of them, I can go path, union, and now instead of being 4 individual circles, that is one path with 4 parts. It's one complete path. If I go to my node editor here, you'll see that is one path, and that's union those all together. I'm going to hit Control Z and go back. Okay, and with union, you can overlay 2 paths, select them both, path, union, and once again it's added those 2 paths together. Okay, I'm going to go back. Now difference subtracts one path from another, and the path that you're subtracting from the other has to be on top. The difference between union and difference, with union you can select 2 or more paths. So you could select 10 paths and union those together. With difference, you can only have 2 paths. It won't work right if you try to select. If I try to select all of these and then select this blue background and I hit path difference, it's only going to subtract one of them. So with difference, you select the path you want, you select the path you want to subtract it from, hit path difference, and that just removed that circle from the square there. If I hit my node editor here, you can see that's one path with a hole cut out in it. So if you want to put 4 holes in something, you would first path union those, and then you could select the square, path difference, and now it will cut all 4 out as you would expect it to. I'm going to hit Control Z, go back a couple steps. Okay, the next function is combine. Combine keeps all the parts of the paths and combines them into one path, but they share the same style, color, opacity, stroke width, etc. And the paths can be open or closed paths, but they still retain the original path completely. It's a little confusing, but let's say I'm going to turn this fill color off on these shapes here, and I'm going to turn a stroke on just to visually represent what's going on here. Now I'm going to turn the fill off, turn the stroke on, and I'm going to adjust that stroke down on all these objects just so you can see a little better. So I'll put those back to the default of 10,000ths. Okay, now you see I have all these objects here. I can select this whole group, the circles, the square, this open path, and I can go path, combine, and that has combined all those shapes into one path, but they all retain their original shape. On this particular group, it's not as obvious, but I'll show you the difference here in a minute. Now if I select my node editor, you can see that's all one path. It combined them all into one cut file or path. Now if I hit Control Z, I'll go back. If I overlap these two, if I go path union, as you can see, it adds them together and removes the inside part where they overlapped. If I select those two and go path combine, that's one path, but as you can see, they both retain their original shape. So I'm going to hit Control Z again. So union and combine are similar functions, but they are not the same and don't always work the same. I see sometimes in the groups people use those two terms interchangeably, but they're really not. They have their purpose. Generally, when I use the combine function, it's because I'm working with open paths. Anytime I'm working with all closed vectors, I only use the union and difference functions. But if I have open paths like this, I want an open line relief cut in this file, I will then use the combine feature to combine those all into one cut file, one path. Now I can move this around, it's all one complete path, but it doesn't run that open line. Now I'll hit Control Z. If I try to difference or union that open line from this square, it will lose that shape. That was union. Or if I tried to difference it, once again it disappears. You can't use union or difference with open paths. So that is why I use combine. Basically, only if I'm working with open lines, I'll use the combine feature. Okay, and then break apart does the same thing that it says. It breaks a path apart. As you can see here, if I select all these and I go path, combine, and then I'm editing around doing whatever and I decide, wait a minute, I want to break that apart and move a few things around. If I select this entire path and I go path, break apart, that's now broke that path apart into its 5 separate pieces. And now I can move this line around, rearrange things, and then when I'm done, path, combine to join that all back together again. So those are the main features I use in Inkscape when I create my files. Like I say, the union and difference are the main two I use on pretty much every design. Combine and break apart I use when I'm working with open paths, or break apart can be handy really when working with any file when you want to break it apart into its individual components. So the next one here would be inset. Like I say, these are functions I don't use a lot, but they can be handy. Inset does pretty much what it says. When I select this file, I'm going to duplicate it, this path here, and I'll change the color. If I hit path inset, as you can see now, if I lay this back up here, it slightly inset that path, every part of it, just a little bit from the original. Now if I hit path, the next function down is outset. It does just the opposite. It will outset that path. So if I hit that a few times on the outset, and then I page that down with this feature here, lower selection to the bottom, now as you can see, that path is slightly outset from the original path. That can be handy if you're making a back plate and you just want a slight border to stand out around your design. You can use the outset. If you wanted to make, sometimes if I'm working on a file, I decide that, maybe just these little rays I want to be smaller, so then I could take this, I could use my path break apart feature to break it apart. I could select just the rays, and then I could go path inset and make the rays a little bit smaller but keep the sun shape the same. So those can be handy tools for editing, changing details, making a back plate. I'm going to hit Control Z and go back a few steps here. I'm going to delete this one. Now the linked offset, the next one I have listed off here, essentially does what the outset does. The difference is it's kind of infinitely adjustable, where outset, if I want to make a bigger backplate or a bigger outline for font or whatever it is, I have to keep hitting that command and adjust it by steps a little bit at a time. If I use the linked offset feature, path, linked offset, once you hit it, it doesn't look like it did anything. But if you'll come over here to your node editor and click on node editor, you'll see it now has one node at the top. Now you can grab that node and pull that up, and you can adjust that out as thick as you want it. If I change the color here, you'll see that's actually a separate path being created from your original path. It's not adjusting your original, it's adjusting this linked offset, sorry. So you can adjust that as far as you want. You know, say I want a big outline like that around this path. Once you're done with the linked offset, the inset and the outset, when you do those, it's already a path. It's just adjusting your original path. With the linked offset, when you're done adjusting that, this isn't a path yet. This is just a linked offset. Once you're done, you're going to want to go back up to path and use that first command, object to path, to convert this into a path. So now I've created my linked offset, converted it to a path. I can now work with that and have, you know, I select these, I have two paths here. Then if I wanted to cut that sun out, I can go back to this difference command that we discussed. Path, difference, and that now cut that out. So, you know, that's where these different functions come in. Simplify is not something I use very often, but simplify will essentially reduce the amount of nodes that you see here. As you can see, when you make a linked offset, it'll generally have some extra nodes that need cleaned up. That it's not the cleanest function. I would personally go through with the node editor and delete these individually and adjust it and clean it up. But if you're in a hurry and you're not super concerned with the exact shape, path, simplify, as you can see, simplified that path, drastically reduced the amount of nodes there, but it does kind of play with the contours a little. Like these were sharp corners before I hit that, and now as you can see, these are kind of rounded out. You know, they kind of lost their shape a little bit. It's not horrible on this particular design. Some designs will be worse than others, but that's one you can use it. If the results work for you, great. If they don't, you'll have to go into the node editor and do it the other way. But like I say, as you can see here, I went back. See, these corners are sharp. I select this path, simplify. Now as you can see, it's rounded these out. It's greatly reduced the node count, and if this result works for you, that's great. It's just an option you can try out. You can use it if it works for you. If not, it was just worth discussing. The last item here is path effects. Path effects I'm not even going to attempt to go over. That'll have to be a separate video because the path effects menu has so many options and features that I could never cover it in one video. But if I select any path and go path effects here, it'll open this window up here, which doesn't look like anything. With the path still selected, if you come down here and click this plus button, this will open up your path effect menu and gives you a whole slew of options here of adjustments and features, different things you can do. You can just deform your path, you can fillet the corners, you can do all kinds of stuff. But like I say, this would absolutely require a separate video to cover all the features here. Because even these, when you open them up, have adjustments and steps inside of them. So there's no way I'm going to cover that at this moment. But essentially that is, if you're getting started out, this list of path commands here are the ones that I use. I would call them the essential path menu items. I use these every day, the red ones every day, the blue ones sometimes. Familiarize yourself with them, play around with them, and remember, Control Z is always your best friend, or edit, undo right here. That's what Control Z does. It basically takes you back a step. So You know, you can play around with your designs. You're not going to screw anything up. You can always go back, undo the command you did if you screw something up. But those are the items I use on a daily basis to create every design you've seen on Bad Dog Metalworks. Hopefully this helps you out. If there's something I could cover better, drop me a message in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.